everybody. Welcome back to Britton's Hangout Hour episode. I've just stopped counting at this point. I'm here today with Derri from Derri's Read It Before. It's been quite a journey to get up to this point.
It's been a bit of a mission, but we got there in the end.
Yes. It's also,
Yes.
she lives in New Zealand, and I live all the way out in Oklahoma, so it's Saturday where you're at, isn't it?
It is. It's actually a lovely sunny day. You can see the sun bouncing off my face, and it is tomorrow. So hello from the future. It's lovely.
Yeah, I know. I was telling you the other day, I'm like, man, I've always wanted to go to, Australia, but, man, I just dread the jet lag. Same thing with New Zealand.
But it's worth coming that little extra bit to New Zealand, because nothing here can kill you. Everything in Australia wants to kill you. It's either poisonous or venomous or stings or just... They're trying to kill you. Just come to New Zealand. We don't even have snakes. Nothing here wants to hurt you. Some of our birds don't even fly. That's how harmless this country is. So, visit. We have Hobbiton.
I was about to say, you guys do have Hobbiton, which I had some friends who saw that a few years ago, and they really loved it.
I've been, and it was amazing. It was, I'm clearly not a spring chicken. I'm like a late autumn chicken, perhaps. But I've been a Lord of the Rings fan for a really long time. I've read it plenty. I adore the movies. So when I got the chance to go to Hobbiton, obviously I leapt at it. And I went, and it was just the most amazingly remarkable thing. It was like walking into the movie.
Have you
Because it was the movie set, but it just blew my mind. Amazing.
Have you seen the original Lord of the Rings, the animated one from the 70s?
I have incredibly vague memories of it from as a child, so but I wouldn't say I remember it. But basically, I was a much younger woman when Peter Jackson movies came out, and they were a huge deal in New Zealand when they were filming. They changed laws in New Zealand so that people could come here from the States and have all of the visa and work contracting things easier. They literally changed laws for it. And there's all sorts of little stories about it from back in the day, but it meant that when they started to release, they were a big deal. This whole country was like, we're about to release. If you were even a little bit nerdy, you were there at the midnight release of those movies. We'd had this out-of-body experience. It was like just the most amazing thing. So New Zealand as a whole is very proud of Peter Jackson. Yay, we're on tourism maps. It was very exciting.
Yeah, I remember seeing a clip from one of the movies he made before he did Lord of the Rings. It was, I think it was called, Bad Taste or something like that.
Lovely. One of the big gore ones.
Yeah, there's one scene in the movie where they're, on a cliff, and the dude's like,
yep,
take your hands up, sucker! Yeah, just starts shooting him.
There's just everywhere. If you're into really schlocky B gore fest movies, I highly recommend looking into Peter Jackson's back catalogue. Highly recommend it. He has one that still boggles my mind. It's called Meet the Feebles. And basically it's like watching the Muppets if they've been on crack for 3 years. And they're disturbing and hilarious and gross. And it is so not for children. I can't say it loudly enough. But it's puppets and it's gross and hilarious, and you may enjoy it a lot. It's a musical. There's song and dance numbers. Seriously, Peter Jackson's imagination is wild. Absolutely wild.
Yeah, that's I watched his King Kong film first. I was a big King Kong fan.
Beautiful.
I was a big King Kong fan growing up. I watched.
So what did you think though with that? Did you think that he treated that with respect, or did you think he kind of went a bit too far into making it beautiful, or
Oh
where
no!
did you stand on it?
Oh no! I like it a lot. I mean, it's not as 70s as the one from the 70s.
Funny that.
I don't know if you've ever seen the one.
Surprise.
I don't know if you've ever seen the one from the 70s, but yeah, it got pretty ridiculous at some points.
Oh, yeah.
Um,
I mean,
I also saw the
it became
one.
famous for a reason. It's pretty iconic.
Also saw the one from the 30s, the original one, which
Wow.
is actually pretty good. I mean, it is kind of funny. You know, King Kong kind of looks like he's made out of clay, but aside from that, it's a good movie, and you feel bad when it dies. You're like, oh.
Yeah. Well, they knew how to pack an emotional punch in those early movies. They were like, okay, we don't have a lot to work with, but what we've got, we're going to use really effectively. So some of those really early movies are amazing. And you're like, how did that affect me? There was nothing to it. There was hardly any story. There was almost no plot. And how did that work? But it does.
There's some really outdated stuff in that film.
Yeah, and yet it still gets you. And if anything, it just points out the flaws in modern movies, that with all the technology and with all of these incredible script writers and the incredible acting, sometimes movies just suck.
Yeah.
And you're like, really? All of that money and that's what you made? Really? So, so it's always lovely when you do get something amazing.
Yeah, the world may never know. I did, but yeah, King Kong was one of the first movies I remember watching when I was a kid, up there with Star Wars and Forrest Gump. I watched that was a frequent watch with my grandmother.
Oh, I bet she enjoyed that.
The original Superman movie from the 70s.
Christopher Reeve, yes.
I still think Christopher Reeve is the best Superman, but you know.
He was. He was. I think because he embodied so much of what Superman, as the character Superman in the books, he was that. And what was heartrending to people of my generation and older is that we had seen him in so many things, and he was just this wonderful, good person. And for the tragedy to befall him as it did was just heartbreaking. But he remained hopeful his entire life that medical science would progress far enough to allow him to regain use of his body. And he wrote an autobiography, and it was called Still Me, because he's still me. And I cried my lemon eyes out reading that, because obviously it was after his accident, and he's talking about all of the changes that it's made in his life, and how people were like, no, you really are Superman. And they're like, and he always took that as they loved his character, not as them recognizing that you, the actor, embody what Superman is. And I just thought that was so incredibly humble and charming for him to genuinely think they were just mistaking him for the movie character.
Yeah, I mean, it's this is gonna sound really bad when you say that, but I have like a really weird fear of being paralyzed. Like that just.
I don't think that's awful at all. I think a lot of people would.
And I mean, I don't want to sound judgmental.
That's terrifying.
I don't want to sound judgmental of paralyzed people. I mean, I'm sure they found their ways to live with it, but I watched a movie called Upgrade, and yeah, gave me the shivers, man.
It's scary. Just the concept of not having that agency.
You're like, whoa.
Yeah, it's not. It's yeah. To be fair, I had the cup put up me on that with the Metallica song. So.
Oh, what?
Way back in the day. One, I think it is.
Oh.
Yeah. It's told from the perspective of someone who's lost the use of everything and has lost their vision and their hearing, and they're basically trapped.
Ouch.
Then that was a scary song. It's a scary song to listen to, because you're like, oh no, I'm not okay with that.
Ouch.
But Yeah.
Yeah, but yeah, Christopher Reeve, man,
Scary.
it's really sad what happened to him, and his wife died a few years later. It was just
It was really, really tragic. The entire, I don't know, that part of the universe time continuum just was like something went wrong there because none of that should have happened. So, Doctor Who needs
also
to get
I've
involved
wanted to
there, I
ride a
think.
horse, so I've not ridden a horse yet in my life. It's on my bucket list. I'm like, well, hope that doesn't
Yeah,
happen.
good luck with that. I mean, hey, it was an incredibly freak accident. So, it's like anything, isn't it? You kind of go in and do the best you can and hope for the best always. But here's something interesting, though, about Christopher Reeve, if you love that movie. Did you know he went to college with Robin Williams
He
and that they
did.
were college roommates and they were best mates their whole lives? Robin Williams took a whole room in his house and set it up with all of the equipment they needed for Christopher Reeve to travel and still be hooked up to everything he needed to be hooked up to, so that he had somewhere other than his own house to be
Yeah,
and be comfortable.
I remember.
How awesome is that?
Yeah, I remember Christopher Reeve said that when he got paralyzed, he was in the hospital, and like he was just kind of, he was of course upset that he, basically just lost the use of
Yeah.
his whole body, and he even was like, "Hey, if things don't go my way, it's all right. I'm ready to go." And his wife's like, "No."
I'm not ready for you to go.
Yeah. And then
Yeah.
this weird man in a Russian accent and a mustache walked in and was saying he was gonna do some stuff to him. Turns out that was Robin Williams, and Christopher Reeve said that was the first
I
time he
didn't know
left
that. Yeah.
since his accident, and
Yeah.
that story always stuck with me.
Oh yeah. And I think that says a lot about who both of them were as men. You know, they were all about let's make the world a better place around us. And they both have had some really tragic things happen to them, which is really sad. I mean, kind of is life, really, isn't it? We've all got tragic stories around us or are aware of something tragic. But that's all right. Like I said, it's life. And we all
Yeah.
find ways to get through.
Well, it must have been cool being friends with Superman.
I think it would have been cool to be friends with Superman. To be fair, it would have been really cool being friends with Robin Williams.
Yeah.
I mean, I watched a documentary with him. Again, this is the both the benefit and the disadvantage to being an autumn chicken. Is I remember having watched it, but I couldn't tell you when or where or what program. But I remember it happened, and Robin Williams was walking in a wildlife area, and they were like, "Look, you must stay on the path. It's actually really risky. There are some gorillas in the area. So if we're confronted with one," and they were telling him how he had to physically hold himself so he wasn't seen as a threat, and it is actually quite dangerous, and and a silverback gorilla the size of, I don't know, Idaho comes out of the jungle at him
Oh God.
and comes into the path and basically gives Robin Williams a hug. Just like, "Oh, hi, dude." And the look on everybody's faces of horror to start with, like, "Oh my God, he's going to tear him to shreds." Ah. And then everyone was just like, "Oh my God, this is happening." As the gorilla just kind of hung out with Robin Williams for 5 minutes and then was like, "Oh, yeah, cheers." And then off he went. And then he got a moment of silence from everybody, just like, "That just happened." I imagine they got back and were like, "Please tell me that all is on film." It was mind-boggling, just this moment of, I don't know, recognition of it was just one of those magical things that you look at and it just grabs you and you're like, fantastic. Oh yeah, being friends with either one of them would have been amazing. So, I'm a little bit jealous of the people who were around that and got to be part of that vibe.
Yeah.
Like the rest of us ordinary mortals.
Yeah. Yeah. Sadly, Christopher Reeve died.
He would have been only a little wee boy.
I was like 3 or 4 maybe when he passed away.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Tiny.
Still enjoy at least I still enjoy those.
Lovely cheesy movies.
Those first
they're
2
so
or 3
delightful.
movies I think are really good, and then it just kind of got progressively cheesier from
Yes,
there.
it did. I think because the first few were genuine adaptations. They were genuinely, we love Superman. Let's put Superman on the screen, you know. And it was about making what's made Superman great on paper and putting that into a different media. And then it became its own thing. And so suddenly the Superman movies were a franchise, and it became that thing, that Hollywood thing, where they're like, oh, okay, well, we're going to forget everything that came before, and now we're just going to look at the last film and make the next one like that, but more. And it just lost that heart that you got with those first few. And that's what makes those so charming and still watchable now. I mean, a little bit painful, because that's not how time works. But they're good movies.
Oh, about that.
You know, the older you get, sometimes it does make things hard. You're like, oh, that's just not how that works. So old fantasy, old science fiction can be really painful. But there are some good ones that have held up really well. Yes.
Yes.
Have you done much horror, sci-fi, thrillery kind of movies, or
Oh
are you
yes.
kind of
I've
still on the
seen...
monster?
Oh yes. My favorite horror movie is a monster film. It's The Thing from 1982.
Oh, excellent. John Carpenter, Kurt Russell. Oh, you can't go wrong. You can't go wrong. And he was a scruffy Kurt Russell too.
Yes, in my review, I actually mentioned he had the sexiest beard this side of the Arctic, so...
Oh, yes. Oh, yes. Hey, sexiest beard since, or before, Tormund on Game of the Thrones. Because that's a good-looking man. Because if you ever see a photo of that actor without that gigantic, fiery orange beard, he looks like he's 12. And, which, to be fair, is the case with most men who habitually wear beards. When you see them without, they just look so much younger. It's ridiculous.
Yeah,
Yes, Kurt Russell could carry a beard.
yeah, yeah, I love that film though. It's like it could be anybody.
So creepy.
I know, yeah. Also, just the like cracks and the sound design in that movie.
Oh, yes. It's amazing.
Should have won an award for sound design, but sadly it bombed.
So much of that film did, but it's a bit like, you know, fiction and reading, and if you're a genre piece, you kind of get ignored, and that's the case in films. You know, you see horror
Also,
movies very rarely
E.T.,
even get it.
That didn't help.
Yeah. No, there was just no way, but they did deserve accolades because that's a great film. It's what's wonderful, because I don't work, and I deal with depression, so I can be awake at ridiculous hours. So I watch a lot of just random things on YouTube, and I watch movie reactors quite often, and it's always funny to watch people watch The Thing, because all of them start going, "Why are they shooting at the dog? Don't hurt the dog! Oh no, the dog!" I'm sitting there going, "You don't know." As they're all going, "But the poor dog." And I love that they flip that trope on its head, because usually, you know, the death of the dog is the horrible thing. It's the thing you don't want to happen. So to give that the opening in The Thing, I just love it. So
I will say
it's magic storytelling.
It is hilarious. It's hilarious how badly the two like guys in that helicopter fail. Like he flubs the grenade.
I know, right?
The poor pilot tries to get it, blows himself up. Then the dude just doesn't hit anything. Accidentally shoots one of the guys in the leg, and then the guy just shoots him. You're just like, jeez.
It's one of those really confusing openings where you're just like, what the hell's going on? Why are they after the dog? Why are they useless at firing? Why is this even happening? And what has this got to do with a UFO in the opening credits?
Yeah, exactly. You're just like, what is going on?
Yeah, you just have no clue. It's brilliant. I love it. Because I like the really late 70s, early 80s action sci-fi stuff. So Alien obviously stands head and shoulders above almost everything for me.
That is in my top
I'm
5.
not a horror person, but I love the tension in that first film, because it just so slowly ramps up and ramps up and ramps up, and you're just getting more and more tense watching it going, oh, it's going to go wrong, it's going to go wrong. And by the time it really does start going wrong, you are so wound up. Every beat hits so good.
I know, it's
good.
I remember one of the first scenes that like scared me when I was a kid was the John Hurt, you know.
Yeah,
it
the
comes,
chest burster scene.
Pops out, and he's like, and then just, you know.
Yeah, but even earlier,
that's actually where I first knew Ian Holm
beginning.
from, way before I saw Lord of the Rings.
Oh, really?
Mm-hmm. Alien.
Nice. Very nice. Well, we've got Ian Holm, and of course John Hurt. You know, he was he's just been in so many things. Everyone's like, I know him from somewhere. I know him from somewhere. And now he's been in almost every franchise, I think. Or was in every franchise, because obviously we've lost him now. But he has such an iconic role in movie history. It's just amazing. That whole franchise spawned, well, it spawned the monster flicks of the 80s, really. And that whole submarine style horror of there's something here. Just brilliantly done. I love there's a lot of stories in the making of Alien, like the initial opening shots where you're going through the Nostromo and they're following just empty space down, and it's all very grimy and grotty and dingy, and like you feel very compressed in and very sort of brought into the space. It's the back of old televisions that's making up the walls.
Oh wow, I didn't know that.
Yeah, like they just went to the tip and picked up every old telly they could find and unscrewed the back, and that's put them on the wall. That's their machinery on the back of the wall.
My favorite fun fact was...
And the minute you know it, you're like, I can see it.
The lady who played Lambert, I forget her name, she was also in the Invasion of the Body Snatchers movie, but
She was in the Witches of Eastwick too.
I digress. But apparently her reaction when the chest burster popped out, that was genuine.
Yeah, all of them were, because they weren't told. They knew something was going to happen because all of the crew had plastic like rain covers on. So they're like, okay, something gross is going to happen. None of them had a clue what. And the syrup that they used as the fake blood, actually, Veronica Cartwright, it splashed in her face. So her reaction is as genuine as it comes. That was not what she expected.
Yeah.
At all. And just, I can't. It's been so long since I saw it the first time. I can't even remember my own level of horror at it.
I mean, I do think the Thing kind of etches out Alien for me, because the Thing still creeps me out. Like, I actually rewatched it earlier this year, and I was just getting something to drink.
Because it could be anyone.
And like, I was looking at my cat really weird, because my cat was just walking around. I'm like, nah, damn it.
Yeah, and I think that's where we get that Alien being more of a suspense sort of thriller than a monster flick.
And you can kill it.
Because you can kill it. Whereas with The Thing, you don't know if you've killed it, because you don't know if someone else has been contaminated. You don't know if you've been contaminated. It's like that sense of the unknown is what makes that so scary.
Yeah, I mean, one of my favorite moments in the movie is when they do the blood test.
Why would you tie people to a sofa?
You don't like that?
I would not have, but just no.
Yeah,
like, at least tie me in a
like
separate chair.
Chairs and like put them in the chairs and keep them away from me. Yeah,
exactly. Right.
I'll give The Thing credit though; it didn't try to kill the other guys; it was just trying to get out of there.
No, this is true. This is very true. But, I just thought that whole film though is genius in the that high pressure situation. There's nowhere to go, so you have to deal with each other as well as whatever the issue is, and everybody deals with that tension differently. So you get to really put pressure on the characters and have them all behave I want to say bigger, but that's not the right word. But in the most
natural,
pressured out. Well, just that high pressure, and everybody deals with pressure differently. So they get to write the extremes of behavior in people. So you get the people who become really paranoid, and you get the people who can deal with that and they can stay calm but become really creepy because they've stayed calm and everybody else is panicking, so now you're the one they're frightened of. And I love that dynamic when it gets done properly. It just sucks you in and you're like, oh
yeah, and they're all mad and they
brilliant.
don't know who to trust. It's a great movie.
Yeah.
It's a great movie.
And you see some people are like, do you know what? I'm out. I don't want to play this game. But there's nowhere to go. So they just get more and more withdrawn, and you can see them becoming the axe murderer, whether they're the monster or not. They just don't want to play.
Yeah,
Oh,
another
so
thing,
good.
that's actually where I knew Wilford Brimley from before I knew he did the
Oh,
diabetes
really?
commercials. Mm-hmm.
I've never seen him in a diabetes commercial. Again, live in New Zealand. But I knew him from an old, like a sitcom type thing, and he was the grandpa. I don't even know what the show was called, but that's where I knew him from. But yeah, a lot of the, because there's so many actors in that sort of period that would show up in all the other big movies at the same kind of level of character where they were kind of, they weren't quite an extra, but you wouldn't really call them cast. It's like they were there and you noticed them, but
Yeah, I also like how everyone looks like regular guys. You know,
I loved that in the thing
they're just
because it
like
felt really real.
because they're just kind of like, yeah, just on another day of the
Yep.
job.
I loved that Kurt Russell's character wore the cowboy hat over his
Yeah.
hood. I thought that was really funny. I was like, okay, that is some, like, I know people who would do that just to sort of poke at people. Like, I don't care. I'm still wearing my hat. And I like those touches because either the actor or the costuming department, somebody has got a handle on the character and gone, nope, this is something they would do.
Yeah, it's
Because nothing calls for that. Like, you don't need for that anywhere. Like, there's nothing in the script that says that has to happen. It's purely just a choice. Somebody's chosen that. Because you don't show up on camera wearing something that hasn't been okayed. Somebody had to decide it. Somebody went, yes, it's a good idea.
yeah, no, well, another one of my favorite parts is where he basically they think he's one of them, or he thinks he's
Yeah.
infected, so they lock him out, and he basically breaks back in and threatens to blow everybody up.
He's got an axe, and you, yeah.
Yeah, and he's like, all right, if you guys screw with me, I'm blowing everyone up, and he ain't playing, you know.
And he looks frightening, at that point because he's like, oh, that's how we're playing. And he's all sort of frostbitten and he's got the snow in his beard, and you're like, okay, you actually look a little bit like a yeti, so okay, it's kind of scary. It's just excellent filmmaking across the board because it's pushing buttons that you're not aware they're pushing. Like the color grading in it gives you that feeling of slightly cold because you've got that sort of slightly blue tinge to things, and it's all that subconscious pushing that they do to put you in that corner where you feel tense and pressured and like, ah! Awesome when they can do it to that degree where you know it's happening but you love it anyway. So good. So good.
Yeah.
What about more recent stuff? What about the more recent sort of the superhero thing that's been doing the rounds lately? If you're into that at all, or are you
I
more
mean,
on the dark side of it?
I do. I am sort of. I was actually talking to a friend of mine the other day.
Marvel generation almost.
Yes, I watched the MCU from the very beginning, and
Ooh,
now I'm just kind of. I'm like, all right, I'm
over it.
starting to fear that perhaps its time has passed. So I'm like, I'm
Yep,
gonna enjoy the good times while they last, and
yep.
I don't follow it as religiously as I did about 3 or 4 years ago. Um,
Yep.
and I did watch the DC films and was very disappointed by many of them. I did like the recent
Mm.
Batman
Uh,
movie though.
It's the only Batman movie I haven't seen, the most recent one. And it's one I do want to watch because everybody's spoken so highly of it. I'm like, okay, yeah, I will give that a go. Do you reckon it's worth a go?
Yeah, I mean the ending is a little like over long, but aside from that, it's a good movie. I enjoyed it a lot. Robert
Is it based
Pattinson.
on any of the known stories in the comics?
Kind of. It's sort of, well, it's an original story, but it is kind of like The Long
Okay.
Halloween. If you ever read that a little bit.
Oh, I know of the Long Halloween. I haven't read it. Okay, yeah, yeah, okay, it could work. All right, I might look at that in the next week actually. Because like I said, I'd sleep funny hours, so I watch things at odd hours, and having a movie in my pocket that I'm pretty sure I'm going to like is always a good thing.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, because I mean, I don't read comics very much now. I did more when I was younger. One of my first boyfriends was a massive comic book, like serious comic book collector. And so I read a lot of the big ones. Like he was involved in it at just like the golden moment in our generation for comics. And so I was there when like The Watchmen was coming out and Dark Knight came out, and so that moment where comic books got dark and got grim, I was kind of there for that, and that was just magic. It opened my eyes to a new way of storytelling, and it took me a while to get the hang of, because we'd talk about it, and he would sort of say, oh, what about when that happened? And I'd be like, well, I didn't really get the sense that that was what was going on. And he's like, well, yeah, because, and he would sort of bring me back and go, but look, all I was really doing was reading words. Like I wasn't engaging and actually paying attention to the images that you're being given, because I hadn't really realized just how much context and how much information you're getting from the images. So it was kind of a great time to be reading comics because
Did
it
you ever
was
read The
evolving.
Sandman? I don't know if you've read Neil
Yep,
Gaiman, but have
yep.
you
I
ever read
read
The
The
Sandman?
Sandman. Yep, yep. I've read The Sandman. I hadn't kept copies because obviously when we broke up, they were his comics, so he got to keep them. But I was able to say to people, yes, I've read Sandman, and yes, it's amazing, and yes, you should totally read them. And
I know you're a big Pratchett
got them from the
fan,
library.
and I
Mm.
know him and Neil Gaiman were very close friends,
Yeah,
and
very close friends.
they even wrote a
Good
book
Omens is
together.
just, yep,
Um, Apparently, American
Good
Gods
Omens.
is apparently he said that American Gods owed a significant debt to one of Terry's books called Small Gods, which I've yet to read.
Yes.
Um,
It leans heavily on the concept that gods only exist because people believe in them, and that when people stop believing in them, their power diminishes, so gods can vanish from the world
mm-hmm.
as they no longer have followers. So where in Terry Pratchett's world, that's made humorous because you've got what is supposedly the biggest religion of an area, but only one person actually believes in this God. Everyone else is a believer of the religion, not of the God. So when a turtle, because that's the only power this God has left, because there's only one person believes in them, when a turtle starts talking to him, first they think he's insane. And he's like, oh, I'm being told by the God. So apparently we all follow. This is what's happening. So the humour of it was brought into it by Terry. And how do we regain faith in this God so this God can become all powerful again? Neil Gaiman sort of looks at it from a human perspective and go, well, as individuals, how are gods going to react to that? How are they going to try and keep believers? And what are they going to do to or for the people who do believe in them to, keep that belief alive? And it's like a massive road trip across the states with old Norse gods and old Greek gods and the new burgeoning technology gods, because it was written in the 80s. So you're getting the birth of the internet and the birth of all of this technology, but you also are getting gods out of Africa who have come across with slaves, and you're getting gods from the native people who obviously have been displaced and are vastly affected by this influx of new cultures and new gods. And the anthropomorphic people of these gods and how they interact with each other. Some of them work together against groups of others. Some of them work alone. Some of them don't want anything to do with any of them. And it makes for a really fascinating insight into America from an outsider's perspective.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, Neil isn't American, he's a Briton. And to people and the nature of belief and how it changes you and how it impacts the way you act. And I mean, he's such a good author. But American Gods is the book that people either love of his or don't like at all.
Oh,
because it does kind of ramble.
Well, it's
and it just wanders around the states and tells the story as it goes.
Well, for some reason, it's my favorite fantasy novel of all time, at least as of this moment.
Yeah.
So.
I mean, it's written beautifully. I mean, there are some moments in it that just sort of speak to your soul, and you're like, yeah, I understand that, what was just said, and I understand it really profoundly. And then he'll go on and say something ridiculous in the next sentence, and you're just like,
yeah, I
was having a moment of epiphany.
I was entranced,
yeah.
Let's say.
Yeah. Because he has that gift.
Yeah, no, I would say Neil Gaiman is either one of or the best fantasy author living today. That isn't Gurm or I know you would probably say Robin Hobb because your Robin Hobb fandom.
It's difficult to
pretty
really
notorious.
compare some authors because when they work in the same field, you can go, okay, yes, you can compare them. Like I would more readily compare Robin Hobb to George R.R. Martin because they're doing similar things. Trying to compare anyone to Terry Pratchett is an exercise in futility. Nobody writes like him. Nobody
Adams.
writes stories like that. He's literally... And even that's not the same because he's dealing with... He's not doing what Terry Pratchett is doing in terms of social satire and interpersonal dynamics. He's telling a funny story. It's a really different thing. And Neil Gaiman does something entirely different again, and trying to compare him to anyone, you kind of can't. He's this might sound strange and you may not quite get what I'm saying, but he's like the David Bowie of writing, where David Bowie is an artist who chooses music as his media. He's not the best musician, he's not the best singer, he's not the best particularly at anything, but David Bowie is a force in music, right? Neil Gaiman is an artist whose media is words, and so he can create something with words that is art. It stands on its own, it has its own thing to say, and you interact with it on an artistic level, like it touches your soul. You know, you're not talking necessarily about themes or prose or character arcs, or that's not what this piece of art is. It's art, and it's its own thing. And other authors love him in the same way that a lot of musicians looked up to David Bowie, just as a creative force. And that's kind of how I see Neil Gaiman. He's just... He's not your everyday author. He's just not. I mean, he's brilliant. And hearing him speak anywhere can show you that. I mean, he just has an understanding that not everyone does. And he's able to, when he has a concept that he wants to talk about or have people engage with. He'll write a story, he'll write a book, he'll write a poem, he'll write a play, he'll write a TV show, whatever. Words are his medium of art. But, and you said it yourself, reading American Gods, you become enthralled.
I'll admit I was very envious of Laura because she actually got to see him speak in front of people. Oh. And I was like,
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
I had that the other day, actually, listening to Christopher Reeve when he was talking to Tory at Tory Talks, because he's met and spoken to Robin Hobb. And, I was a little bit jealous, just going to say.
Yeah, I was... A little bit. I was going to say, it's funny you say that, because that's kind of a similar way, I think, of Alan Moore. Him and Neil Gaiman.
Yeah.
I mean, Alan Moore, I don't know if Gaiman would have had a career if not for Alan Moore, but that's a discussion for another time.
Possibly not.
But,
I said, yeah.
But what I was going to say is, like, Moore is so... Like, he's such a force to be reckoned with, but he chose comics to express himself out of all the other mediums.
And hugely influential.
Yeah. I mean,
hugely influential.
I mean, he might be the Shakespeare, Dickens of comic books. Like, everyone has been influenced by him ever since he came onto the scene, whether they want to admit it.
Yeah, I look at that as somebody like, I don't know, Hitchcock or Spielberg, where they find a medium where they know how to use it. And they just innately know how to use this medium to tell the story they want to tell. And as you said, Alan Moore, I mean, some of the strips that you see his hand in, where even just the placement of each story grid tells its own story. Like the way it flows across a page can be so different under Alan Moore. And in the same way that, Spielberg will do something with colour, like he did with Schindler's List, or Hitchcock would do something with perspective, like he did in The Birds, and there'll be something different in the way that they view how they want to tell their story. It's that nobody else has considered before, that nobody's really trusted that they know what they're doing enough to risk it. But then you get somebody like Alan Moore who goes, no, I can do this, and I can tell the story across panels in this way, because look, it works.
Yeah,
it's powerful.
I mean, I've enjoyed all of Gaiman's work too. Going back to Neil Gaiman, I've enjoyed all of his work in one way or another, but none else of, or that's not English. Nothing else of his has
you know how to word.
has grabbed me as much as The Sandman and American Gods.
And it can have a lot to do with just where you are at in yourself and what interests you at the time and where your own philosophy sort of leads you. And The Sandman, a bit like American Gods, is all about kind of where you are in yourself. What are your dreams in Sandman's case, and what are you striving for, and what is it that will make your life balance in the way that the Sandman is quite often looking for, or in terms of American Gods, and that what do I believe in, and what is my driving motivation, and what do I hope to get out of anything I do. Those are really difficult things to write about, and for Gaiman to do it in a way, and dude, how much talent does it take to make it look that easy? You look at Sandman and you're like, it's a comic. No, it's an earth-shattering piece of art that makes you question everything about your reality. This is not just anything, let alone just a comic. The talent that takes is... I mean, I don't have words.
I know. It's hard. It's also a similar thing I could say about, like, Bradbury. I don't know if you've read Ray Bradbury, but
I've never really been into Ray Bradbury. I don't know if it's because my mum was, and it was like, no, those are mum books. But I never got into Ray Bradbury or Wilbur Smith for the same reason.
I'm
They're probably
Wilbur
really good. I'd
Smith.
probably really like them, but who knows?
Yeah, that name doesn't ring a bell. Wilbur Smith.
So I'm just thinking of my mum's bookshelves now.
Oh.
Some things of horror on there.
But yeah, no, he's Neil Gaiman has certainly changed fantasy in a lot of ways. He's good at connecting.
Certainly brought. Oh yeah.
I mean, I read Ocean at the End of the Lane, and I liked it, but I was just like, man, it's not American Gods.
I actually haven't read The Ocean at the End of the Lane. I keep
very
thinking
good.
that I have. And then I will see it somewhere and go, oh no, I haven't read that. I should read that. But I haven't. I've read American Gods, I've read Neverwhere, I've read Good Omens, obviously. I've read, trying to think off the top of my head. What else has he written? I've got the recent one, the Norse
I still need to
myths.
read that. I love Norse myth.
Bugger of that. I got it on Audible, and I have to really concentrate on it because he narrates it. Oh, Stardust is another one I've read. But he narrates the Nordic one, and look, I love Neil Gaiman. He should not narrate his own books because he's actually got quite a flat voice.
I was about to say, he has such a good voice,
It doesn't go anywhere. It doesn't go anywhere. So unless you're looking at him and you're engaging with him speaking, it doesn't. There isn't a variance in his tone. I go to sleep so fast if I'm not deliberately concentrating on what he's saying because it's lovely. It's soft and it's got a velvetiness to it. And seriously, every time. He should not narrate his own books. So I had to really concentrate. But it's good. I enjoyed it when I could stay awake.
Yeah, no, it's one of we see these people on YouTube just kind of going like, oh, Terry Pratchett, and I just puff my chest and I go, well, have any of you guys read Douglas Adams?
No, your response to them should always be, and I say this as a massive Terry Pratchett fan, Discworld would not exist if it weren't for Neil Gaiman. Because he wrote the first 3 books in Discworld and universally accepted as the least strong of all of the Discworld books. They're nobody's favourite. Nobody's favourite. And he wasn't going to continue writing in Discworld. He'd had his play in fantasy and he was working on a manuscript in a science fiction world. And Neil Gaiman rang him and wanted more of the character death. A couple of weeks later, Neil Gaiman's phone rings. This is in the biography of Terry Pratchett as well, so I am not making this up. I promise. A couple of weeks later, he rings Neil Gaiman. Neil Gaiman answers the phone. Hello? And Terry Pratchett says to him, "You bastard!" and hung up. And we got Mort, book 4 in the Discworld. And 41 books later, Terry Pratchett went back, 30-something books later, he went back to his science fiction story and helped Stephen Baxter co-wrote with him that story that got interrupted way back when for Mort. So it's the Long Earth series.
Yeah.
So we would have none of Discworld as it became in its fabulousness without Neil Gaiman.
Yeah, no, what was I gonna say? I've wanted to read Pratchett for a while. I just haven't gotten around to it, and I don't know where to start. There's like 40 of them. I've heard people say either Mort or Guards is a good place to start.
I usually don't recommend Mort. I don't think it's a very strong book in itself. Once you've got a handle on what Discworld is, Mort is great because it adds to the world. But on its own, it's just a strange little book. It's a strange little story. It's like people read it and they're like, okay. Guards, great place to start. Great place to start.
That's what Alan said. Yeah. I think I heard Alan say.
He's not wrong. It's a really, really good place to start. You start in a city that's kind of familiar. I mean, it's a city. What races that you encounter, you're usually quite familiar with. People have an idea what a troll is. People know what dwarves are. Okay, we can work with that. It's easy to fall into that world. Meeting an alcoholic, depressed policeman, that's within your realm of imagination. We can do that, not a problem. And he takes you from there. I also love the beginning of the Witches series, Weird Sisters, which is a little bit more overtly fantasy. It's set out in the countryside, in like a mountaintop kingdom, and it's witches living in villages, and the way they deal with new ideas and new situations. And the first one is a very deliberate and very decided and very hilarious piss take of Macbeth. If you're in any way familiar with the story of Macbeth,
I do love Macbeth.
It will smack you in the face from the first sentence, because it's three witches on a heathy moor around a fire, basically cackling. when shall we three meet again? And then it immediately kicks into Terry Pratchett, and one of the witches goes, "Well, I can do next Tuesday." What? You're expecting, at the heart of the blue moon, and no, I can do next Tuesday, because she's babysitting for our Maureen. So you get that shift in tone immediately. It sort of throws you into village life as opposed to this Shakespearean drama, even though that is still the story that's kind of being told. I find that really funny, because I find that juxtaposition of supposedly serious theatre and this slightly absurd comic village life just kind of squashed together, just wonderful. And I adore Weird Sisters. It's one of my favourites. Still gives me some of my most hearty belly laugh moments. Like the early, probably the first, between books sort of 5 or 6 to books, I don't know, maybe 20 something, mid-20s. Those are like the funny books, and that you actually laugh, because haha, that was funny. The later books are funny in that way that makes you slightly uncomfortable about the fact that A, you thought it was funny, and B, it was a little bit too close to home to actually laugh out loud, because that happens. So those first 20 odd books are I wouldn't say light, because he can be very serious, but has the most overt humour, and they are remarkable. And I would highly recommend you start either with Weird Sisters or Guards. We're getting to the time of the year that it would be perfectly suitable to read Hogfather.
Isn't that the one about the assassins? Because I've heard he goes into a lot of different directions.
Yes.
Like there's death, then there's the guard stuff, and then there's there's the barbarian guy.
Oh, Cohen the Barbarian is wonderful.
Who's basically not even bothered.
It's Conan who never died.
Yeah, it's basically not even bothering to try and differentiate him from Conan.
Because nothing can kill him. He's a barbarian that's lived by his sword, so clearly he's unkillable because nothing's ever killed him. And he's marvellous. A slight tangent. If I go too far off topic, just say stop.
All right.
And reel me back, because I can get lost. There is a wonderful fan-made film that they crowdfunded, and they bought the rights and everything. They've done it all legally. There's nothing dodgy about it. There's a fan-made film called Trollbridge on YouTube by Snowgum Films, and it is an adaptation of a short story. It's a Discworld story. You need to have read Discworld. It's about, I don't know, a dozen pages, this short story, and it's basically Cohen the Barbarian deciding that there isn't even a dangerous way he can die anymore. He's just going to die of old age as an old man, and that's not him. So he goes looking for a troll. He's like, I'm going to kill a troll. I'm old. They might kill me. It'll be a big, fiery, at least I'm still a barbarian death. He goes looking for a troll, and he finds a troll at a troll bridge, and that's the story. Snow Gum Films made the short film of it, and it is the most true adaptation of a Terry Pratchett work I have ever seen. They got the actor who played Cohen, bang on. They got the way he speaks, bang on. They got the troll he interacted with, bang on. The whole thing is stunning. And it's about, I don't know, 12 minutes long. It's so good. It's just so good. And it's Cohen the Barbarian. He's the skinny old man who just has run out of challenges because he kills everything. He's marvelous.
Yeah, it's
Yes. Oh, he's fascinated by life.
I've heard a lot of people really like the death one.
Actually, and you'll know, you spend a fair bit of time on Discord. There's been a lot of loss in the Discord community lately. People have lost parents. Like in one chat I was in, I say chat, that's not true. I was in a thread in a Discord channel, and 4 different people had lost a parent since September. I was like, that is heartbreaking, and my heart goes out to them. It's an awful thing to lose a parent. And it made me really, sounds weird, it made me glad to know the character Death as written by Neil Gaiman in his world of Sandman.
I wonder if Neil Gaiman
Terry
was
Pratchett.
inspired by Terry Pratchett's death when he made his death.
Oh yeah, he loved Terry Pratchett's death. He literally was like, I want more of that, and they incorporated that death into Good Omens. So that's the same death that's in Discworld. But both of their deaths, you've read Sandman, they're compassionate and they're kind, and it's not a scary thing. It's like the people who are left have each other. I'm here to be with this entity as they take their next steps. So I was just really glad to know that character as people were talking about the losses they've experienced lately. Because, yes, death is horribly sad, and losing someone special is devastating. But to have that in my head, that when I lose someone, that sort of entity will be there to guide them to their next bit, kind of takes some of the horror of it away. That sense of, I don't know, that the awfulness of death. They managed to take that away from me. Death isn't awful. Death is just something that happens, and fearing it is silly. And maybe sometimes it isn't awful. Maybe sometimes it is just the next thing that has to happen. And I think it makes, particularly with people who perhaps have their parents in aged care who are slowly diminishing, I think it would help if they meet this version or Neil's version of death, where it is a kindness and it is this generosity of spirit, of caring. I think that's beautiful. So, and death in Discworld is also really funny. You can get death t-shirts and badges and magnets that say, I could murder a curry. Because he likes curry. He likes Indian food. He's lovely. He's a wonderful character.
Yeah, I've heard I've heard he's kind of like,
he's fascinated.
There's almost this like, he's almost just like a guy doing his job basically, and it's just that's kind of it.
Absolutely, it is his job. He's the only character in Discworld that you see pop up everywhere. Of the 41 books in Discworld, he's at least mentioned in 40. He gets at least one speaking line in probably 35 of them. That happens all the time. So, and he plays a bigger or smaller role in some books, depending on what the story needs. And even in the subset that is called the Death series, he's not in them an awful lot. He's usually the B plot, which I think is why Mort doesn't work for people, because they're told it's a death story. It's that character's book. It's not. It's Mort's story, who has been apprenticed to death. And so you don't actually get a lot of the character of death. His books tend to be a bit of a philosophical look at life, because he's very intrigued by humanity and what makes humans work, and what you guys are weird is kind of what comes across. He's like, why do you do that? That's not logical. What would humans be without love? And Death answers, rare. I'm like, oh, okay. You know, what's worth living for? Death's response to that is cats. Cats are nice. Okay.
You must be on some other plane of existence.
He is. He lives in his own plane of existence. Everything is black. Like, everything is black in shades of dark grey. He does have plumbing, because he does have a human servant. And Alfred is an old bloke with the fag hanging out his gob, with the ash kind of hanging on for dear life, who fries everything to eat. And his horse, Binky. So he has hay. But because, of course, Death's horse is called Binky. Of course it is. And Binky is white and just lovely. I love Binky. And those are the touches that make Terry Pratchett's humour work. Like, he looks at something that should be really cliche, and he just tweaks it enough to make you go, that is insanely funny. Because it is. Later in the series, one of the policemen in the City Watch series, he gets a gooseberry, which is Terry Pratchett's take on, would have been a blackberry in the 90s. And a gooseberry is powered by an imp, so a tiny little demon. And every time the alarm would go off, it would go bingly, bingly, beep. And he hated it. He kept trying to kill the imp in this thing. And it would be like, I'm telling your wife. He doesn't use me. He writes down his notes on my packaging. And he's always going, shh, shh, shh. And those are the things that I think are hilarious. Because that's a very people thing. You know, you look at an older bloke, you give him a new piece of technology, he doesn't want to use it. It's for note taking. He's going to write his notes on the box. You know, meanwhile, his wife is going, but I bought you the latest thing, and it's going to make your life so much easier. Meanwhile, he's going, I could just I could just remind myself at that hour I'm going to go and do something. That's the level of humour, and it can be remarkably refreshing. Particularly when we read fantasy. Those are some heavy books. They can be very grim, they can be really dark, they can be really profound, they can be heavy reading. So if you jump into a Discworld, which does a lot of the same things, but with this lightness, it can lift you tremendously. So I highly recommend that you get into them. I really, really do.
In Discworld?
It's literally a disc. It is a flat disc. It rests on the back of 4 giant elephants, who only get named in one book, so I'd forgotten their names, but they are listed. And they stand on the back of a giant turtle who swims through space. And nobody knows where the turtle is going, or if it's coming back from somewhere, or if there's a plan. And they don't even know what gender the turtle is. The turtle is there. And it's just because the disc, how does he put it? The Discworld exists at the very edge of reality, where reality is beginning to fray. So unreal things can exist on the disc. Because it's so close to unreal, it kind of shouldn't exist. Some of the things he comes up with are just genius. There is a thing in the Discworld called an inspiration particle, and it comes from within reality, and it bounces off all of reality. And because the disc is so close to being unreal, these inspiration particles can become real in the Discworld. So you get the weirdest things, like suddenly a concept will become an entity in the Discworld. Very strange thing. Or an inspiration particle could hit the head of a playwright And suddenly he'll be daydreaming about old Laurel and Hardy black and white movies or Charlie Chaplin movies and laughing himself silly and then unable to explain to anybody why a man walking funny with a cane is going to make people laugh. Because he knows it will. Because he's had the inspiration particle hit him in the head. He knows it's going to make people laugh, but he can't explain it because it's not from his reality. The recognizable elements of our world in Discworld is what makes Discworld work. Because you can see so much reality in it. And I think you should probably start. If American Gods is your thing, I think I need more information. I'm thinking you could. No, I need more information. What other favorites do you have?
Well, I guess what intrigues me about Discworld is I've heard a lot of people say, "Hey, if you like Douglas Adams, or because I'm a big Douglas Adams fan." Now I've heard some people go like, "Well, they do different things and whatever," and I'm like, "Yeah, funny fantasy, same difference." But yeah, they're like Terry Pratchett, won't go wrong there. I'm like, yeah, well,
you kind of can't. I mean, you can, but mostly you can't. And hey, if you do like Douglas Adams, I would actually be more inclined to say to you, have you read Red Dwarf?
I have not. I've heard of the show Red Dwarf. I haven't seen it.
Yeah, and it was obviously it began being based on a book. I think if you enjoy Douglas Adams, I think that's a more similar book to read. But it doesn't get the same love as Terry Pratchett because when you think about British fantasy humour, that's where you're going to land. Basically, it will come down to, of the two, would you rather read a mystery or a fairy tale?
Probably a mystery. I don't know.
Mystery. No, that's fine. Then that means yes, start with guards.
Oh, okay.
Because those are the policemen. So you get a fantasy mystery each book. And this is where I say that Discworld is the most forgiving series of all fantasy series. And it looks scary because there's 41. It really doesn't matter. They all have a standalone plot. There is no big overarching story. There is no big, we're working toward an end. No. Think of it more like a shared world, and you're just being told a story from a moment in its time.
Mm-hmm.
So the subsets, as they're called, are literally just because those stories are based around that set of characters in their part of that world. There's a slight through line in the fact that they are the same characters and you're just getting them at different points in their time, but nothing connects the plots.
Mm-hmm.
So you could literally go into just about any Discworld book with no knowledge. It's helpful if you do enjoy that to read fantasy, which tends to be series, to begin at the beginning of a subset and just go, okay, I'm going to read about these characters. And quite often there are crossovers. One of the sub-series is The Wizards, which is insanely named because it's not about the wizards. It's about a wizard who's never at the college where the wizards are. That's the point. He's somewhere where he's the stranger in a strange land, learning a new thing, having to deal with oddness. But you meet the wizards mostly in the watch books because they're in the city where the watch are. So they bump into each other a lot. So you meet them and you get to know them as characters because they live in the same world as the watch. And then on the later books, when this wizard that's never at the university does finally get back to the university, you already know the wizards because you met them in the watch books. But you've never met them before if all you've read is the wizards books. So it kind of arbitrary in terms of reading orders. There's kind of a timeline. Doesn't really matter where you are in it, which is why I don't have a problem referring people to Hogfather at this time of year. It works wonderfully as a standalone. It has assassins and a Christmas line and a New Year's line and eggs and sausages. Sausages are good. And the granddaughter of Death, because he has a granddaughter. There's a story. But he has a granddaughter. And Alfred is in it. He drinks an awful lot of sherry because people leave sherry out for the Hogfather at Christmas or Hog's Watch. And Discworld is hard to express in terms of why it works, but it really does. And I'm always thrilled when people who are like, I don't know, maybe, will read a couple and one of them will click. And I know they've clicked because suddenly they're in a Discord thread somewhere going, I just read this book that's in Discworld and it was fabulous. I'm like, yes. Welcome. Now read that one.
All right. I'll be right back real quick.
But,
I'm in a row now. You know, getting back to Terry Pratchett, I don't know if you've ever seen this, but there's a photo of him, and he's wearing a shirt that goes like, J.K. Rowling couldn't make it, Philip Pullman was doing something else, and there's someone else, and he goes,
and
hi.
so you're left with me.
He's like, hi, I'm Terry Pratchett. And I'm like, all right, yes.
Yeah. He's got, I read last year when it was released, I read the biography of Terry Pratchett, and he'd started working on it before he died, and it was finished by his assistant / friend / dog's body. And I mean, I bawled through it because it was just heartbreaking. But there are stories in it that just makes you laugh, because here's this author who at one point was the most shoplifted author in Britain.
What?
Saying he would go to signings that nobody went to, you know, and that boggles my mind that could even happen. And he was rather wonderfully described by Neil Gaiman in a eulogy as a very angry man, in that people would describe Terry Pratchett as this supposedly cheerful person because of the way he wrote. And actually, no, he was angry at the disparity of availability of resources to people. He was angry about the way minorities were treated. He was an angry man. And I remember when I heard that, I immediately was like, yes, that makes perfect sense. Because he spent so many years basically taking a really sharp pin and going, you're wrong, you're wrong, you're wrong, you're wrong about all of these things in the world, and making them funny. And
I've heard Raph from, I don't know if you ever watched Raph Bluetext channel, but he said a similar thing.
I do. Raph's lovely.
He said a similar thing about Terry Pratchett. That's funny you bring that up.
Most Discworld fans are aware of it, because the moment Neil was able to say that at the eulogy, every Terry Pratchett fan kind of went, yes, that makes perfect sense. And I mean, I've spoken with Raph, and he's wonderful, and he's a bigger Discworld fan than me, which is saying something. He gets it as well, that rage, because he, even in his early books, of which Guards is one, he's poking fun at things he doesn't think are fair. Guards has a lot where he talks about class disparity, which is more of a thing in Britain than it is in the States. But, I mean, you guys have a clear enough distinction between the haves and the have-nots that you get the story. You understand what it's telling you about the way the haves treat the have-nots.
Mm-hmm.
And the unfairness of it, and the way anyone supposedly right-thinking person should feel angry about how things are accepted. And Terry makes it clear by poking fun of it and just kind of going, do you see how ridiculous this is? It's just a gift that he had. But I have barely stopped talking, for which I apologise greatly. This is supposed to be a conversation, not a lecture.
This is great.
Seriously, I can be terrible. Because I know that you love Neil Gaiman. I know that you love Neil Gaiman. But who else do you have to buy? Who else do you just have to read all the time?
Oh man, I'm so bad when it comes to this, because
that's all right.
It's like it's books more than like sometimes the author, because like, you know, it's like, oh man, you know, it's oh hello. I do like I do like George R.R. Martin, though, you know. Wish he'd finish those books already, but you know, can't all get what you want.
We all do. And let's face it, if we all won the lottery tomorrow, we're not going to go to work tomorrow, are we? We're going to be like, I'm going to spend some of this money and have some fun, thanks. So, you know.
I like his I like Robert E. Howard a lot, though he wrote more short stories than
sci-fi
novels. I read China Mieville's Perdido Street Station and The Scar last year. I really enjoyed those. I read the Gentleman Bastards books, which, funnily enough, I'm reading Republic of Thieves right now. So,
nice.
Which I can see why people say it's the weakest of the books, but I'm still mostly enjoying it, though I have some ranty stuff about that. I don't want. It's very spoilery, so it's.
That's all right. So, as Alan would say, you like your swashes buckled.
Oh yeah, I do like my swashes buckled. Yeah, I've actually gotten a couple recommendations from Alan. I just need to go pick them up.
Yeah, Alan does have. I mean, he does have really good taste. Where he just, if you're very specific about what you want, and he has an answer, his answer will be great. It's that specificity that you need. But no, he's good at finding a swashbuckler. That's for sure.
I finally got on the first Law Train last year, and then I finished the series this year. So, you know, that's been fun. Also, Joe Abercrombie also has a wicked sense of humor. I don't know if it's the same thing. Probably not like Pratchett, but he
very different. His humor is a bit more interpersonal rather than societal. Like it's more when you know the character, you know why it's funny. Whereas Pratchett is, if you exist in the world and have ever had to deal with the world, this is funny. So it is a very different thing. But Abercrombie is very dry, I find his humor very dry.
Oh yes, I love it.
I enjoy that. I do enjoy that.
There's
I loved getting, because I've only read the first 3 of the first Law. I liked that getting to the end of Before They Were Hanged and getting that gut punch at the end of Before They Were Hanged of, are you serious? And I loved it.
Oh,
like I totally acknowledge why it would bother some people. I loved it. I loved it for the fact that it made me go,
that was bad.
Are you kidding? I thought that was genius.
Oh, if you thought that was bad, wait till you get to the groin kick that's Last Argument of Kings. That's just complete
I finished the 3 of them. I mean, that one, I think that I was kind of expecting it in the last one, maybe because of that middle book. But that was just, I enjoyed that. I enjoyed the way he went, you were expecting this, weren't you? Gotcha. I just enjoyed, because it felt very much like the author doing that. It felt like the author was talking to me as a reader and going, not that kind of story.
Yeah.
And I just really liked that. It tickled me.
One of my favorite moments I read, this was actually in Best Served Cold, which is the first of the standalones. Don't worry, not really a spoiler, but one of the characters is this guy named... There's this guy named Morveer who's a master poisoner, and very proud of that fact. And despite the fact
Why would you announce that?
even though he's kind of even though he's he's kind of sad and pathetic because of how just narcissistic and awful he is. And like deep down, like you get his perspective and you realize like he does actually want to connect with people, but he rubs people the wrong way. And like there's one moment where he is just like, I've poisoned everyone in this room, and they're just like, what? He's like, just kidding. And then Vitari, the lady who worked with Glocta and before they were hanged, she goes, I've had punches in the face that were funnier than that, and I just busted out laughing. I love that so much.
I like it.
I
do like that.
This is so good.
And also that can put you in that position where you're in the room and you're in that vibe in the moment where you've just gone, kind of, what? That wasn't funny. To have that as the next line,
so
yes,
good.
You feel it. You're like, I'm totally laughing in response to that because it's just the right thing to say in that moment.
Scott Lynch is very funny as well.
It's Lies of Locke and Moore, isn't it?
Yes.
Yeah. It's on the list. Oh, so many books on the list. But,
I read. I did start The Witcher. I just haven't continued with it. I like the game.
I read some of the short stories. I really enjoyed those. And then I've just heard too much about the books, really, to want to go into them. I might just leave it as something I've enjoyed to this point.
Oh, man. I like The Dark Tower.
I always think
I haven't read The Dark Tower in a very long time. And I mean, you want something
I haven't read The Dark Tower.
It's bizarre and unique. There you go. So.
And that is something everybody agrees on. Nothing else compares. I mean, I've read a fair amount of Stephen King, but I haven't read The Dark Tower. And it's on the list.
Oh,
that mythical list that we all have as booktubers. It's on the list.
Here's all the crazy, wacky, strange ideas I've had formulating in this weird brain of mine.
In Stephen King's head. Let's face it, it's a scary place to even think about.
That should be his
when you
next
think of some of the
novel,
things that man has written
the
down.
head of Stephen King to see what creatures lurk in there.
I think you'd need to be admitted to a psych ward. You'd be like,
that actually would be a fun idea. Just go inside an author's brain. There's just like eldritch abominations in there, and you're just driven insane by the.
But what would be even funnier would be you came out the other end of it and you were in, I don't know, Beatrix Potter's head or something, like somebody really twee, and you're
like, I want to have.
Wow, that's living in your head. I'm not going into that person's head. Lovecraft, no, you can have that. Thanks.
Yeah, no, I probably want some tea after being in Beatrix Potter's head.
Well, yeah, there's that too. She was tripping balls. Some of the stories she wrote, you're like, seriously, a talking squirrel? Okay. What kind of mushrooms were you gathering a couple of days ago?
Yeah, honestly. No, I've not read Beatrix Potter, but that might be a little too saccharine.
I mean, they're little kid stories, so it kind of goes with the territory. But some of the really old stories, I mean, you look at things like Peter Pan and Alice in Wonderland, and you're like, what the fuck were you guys on? You have to remember that these were the days when you had morphine in your cough mixture and you could get cocaine in your fizzy drinks, and like they were on some stuff.
Have you've read Alice in Wonderland? That's one where you're like, what the fuck were you on?
Exactly, like you were tripping balls, man. Like that was a hell of a ride. Like what even the heck? But this is, I mean, you look at, and I'm going off on a tangent again, so feel free to stop me. The delineation of genre is a really perplexing thing to me, because when you look at classics, it can include a huge variety of things, and they all go, oh no, but it's classic. So it's a classic before it's anything else. But you can get Alice in Wonderland as a classic, and Crime and Punishment. You can get Rudyard Kipling's Kim as a classic, and you can get, I don't know, The Grapes of Wrath as a classic. Those are very different books. But they're fiction. And so they both get to count as classics. But if you like Crime and Punishment and Grapes of Wrath, you're a literary scholar. If you like Kim and Alice in Wonderland, well, you like fairy tales. They're both classic. They're all classics.
You know, that's funny you bring that up. I've talked about this very thing with I don't know if I'm hoping you've seen Philip Chase's channel in the past.
Oh God, yes. I have spoken with Philip.
Oh,
he's a lovely man.
Yes, he is.
Yes, he is a lovely, lovely man. I think he's not real. Nobody's that nice in real life. I'm very much leaning into AP, Ada Critical Dragon's belief that, in fact, Philip Chase is a master bad guy. He is the nemesis because his public facade is so lovely. There has to be something behind it.
No, but on the real.
Anyway, that's off track.
On the real though, I was talking to him on this podcast a few months ago, and I'm like, I wonder what makes something like, I don't know if you've read Kurt Vonnegut, but like what makes Kurt Vonnegut, who is very much science fiction, despite what, like what makes him good? What makes him worthy enough to be a literary writer, and what makes like Philip K. Dick not? Because I think both of them are very strong writers for different reasons, but it's just kind of or why is, I don't know, Neil Gaiman's kind of in that weird spot where they don't know where the hell to put him.
He's an artist. He's not an author. And that's why I say he and David Bowie, they don't really fit in their respective worlds. David Bowie's not a musician. He's called a musician, but he's not a musician. He's an artist who chooses music as his media. Neil Gaiman is an artist, and words are his media. So I don't. It sounds awful, but when I say he's not an author, that's not at all me saying he can't write, because the man can write. But he writes as an artist. He uses words to create a specific thing. So yeah, I'm okay with you going, we're going to take him out of the equation, because he doesn't belong there.
Yeah, no, like, oh God, what's another example? Like, how come Scott Lynch isn't, I think Scott Lynch is a great writer. Like, why is he just considered, like, fun? I mean, he is fun, but, like, why is he considered just...
You are going to read Terry Pratchett, and so you will, hopefully not far away in the future, agree with me when I say Terry Pratchett is this generation's Shakespeare, and he is given nowhere near the credit that he deserves as a wordsmith, at somebody thought-provoking, at somebody who is challenging the status quo and talking about the world as it is in incredibly profound ways that are easily accessible. Why is he not considered an amazing writer? Why is he the funny English guy?
No, what's...
there's so much more.
I know.
George R.R. Martin, he deserves so much credit. How many people has that man brought back to reading for fantasy stories? Because that's what they're just fantasy stories. They're just about dragons. Have you read these books? They are incredibly dense. They're philosophical. They're political. They're interpersonal. They're talking about family dynamics. They're talking about intergenerational trauma. There's some serious stuff going on here. He's the guy that wrote the dragon books.
I don't get it either, to be fair to you.
Yeah, but people want to read these books. Maybe that's it. Maybe people have to not want to read your books for you to be considered.
Like...
literarily strong.
Here's another good one. Like, why is Stephen King considered like popular, like McDonald's? And they say it in a really like condescending tone. And why is like Edgar Allan Poe like one of the classics? I don't get it.
Well, there's that, isn't there?
I do love.
I
I
mean,
do love Poe.
Stephen King is an odd one though, because he pumps out as many pieces of crap, I'm sorry, as he does genius, because some of what he writes is mind-bogglingly brilliant. And I do mean mind-boggling. You read it and your mind is boggled, going, how did he even come up with that?
There is some of
Other
it. I
things
will
he
admit,
writes
there are
and
some
you're
of
just
his
like,
books that are
really?
just like, huh.
Yeah, he's like, you should not have put that on paper, Stephen. Really?
Just
That's
put
not
that
okay.
on like a. I should.
You should have kept that one inside. But his brain is a disturbing place. Somebody should talk to him. And yet he comes out with stories that are breathtaking in their beauty. Some of the things he writes are beautiful. The way he writes communities, my God, it's a talent nobody else has. I have never read a community of people so incredibly put on a page that you know everybody. You know them. And it's easy to follow. And it doesn't matter how many characters he creates. You know who they are. You never lose track. No other author can do that. I have never read another author who could build a community the way Stephen King does. It's astonishing the talent the man has for that. And yet he also writes Dirty Bird as a curse. And you're like, really?
Are you talking about Misery?
Yeah. I mean, I love Misery, don't get me wrong. Annie Wilkes is one of his scariest villains.
I was about to say,
but,
like, that's kind of what's interesting about Annie Wilkes, is that, like, she's just this
yeah,
very uptight,
she's
religious
disturbing.
woman, and then she just, like, and if you've seen the movie, the hobbling's worse in the
So
book.
good.
Like, you think the hobbling was bad in the movie, and don't get me wrong, it was horrible. But
It was pretty bad. I was talking to my sister about it because she watched it the other week. I said, that hobbling scene, I said, it's very different from in the book, but they're about the same in terms of how awful it is to watch/read. Like, you even reading it, you're like, oh, trying to pull away from the page as it's happening. Like, oh, I don't want to read. And yet he can write beautiful friendships, and the man's talented. Anyone who says different is deluded. The man has serious writing chops.
mm-hmm.
Has he also been so stoned out of his head he doesn't know which way is Tuesday? Absolutely. It's just kind of who he is.
Take another shot of the Britton's Hangout Hour, but I like to bring this story up. One of the ones that just blows my mind about his addiction, apparently it was so bad, he doesn't remember writing Cujo. I'm like,
not at all. No memory of it at all.
Like, how does that
happen? I haven't had a stroke myself. I get it. But there are entire pockets of my life I have no memory of. So I understand that it can happen. I don't have an understanding of how that happens because of drugs.
Maybe it's just because
I believe
I'm
him.
young. I'm 22. Maybe it's just because I'm young and, I don't know, but I'm just like, my God,
How do you forget writing a whole book?
Like, how do you get
Surely,
so
that's
loaded
not just
out
a
of your
weekend
mind?
blackout,
Like, how do you get so loaded out of your mind you don't even remember what you were doing? You're just like, oh, I have a book.
Yeah,
Here you go, publishers.
So what I'm guessing is an extensive period of time. Because it's a book. It's not like he wrote a short story and it took him a week. It's a book. It's a chunk of time. That's some serious brain damage going on. If you've lost that much time, there are pieces missing.
Yeah, it's
just saying.
I've
seen my brain scan from a stroke. There are pieces missing in that man's brain. To forget that much time.
I'm surprised.
There are some grey areas.
I'm surprised he hasn't stroked out yet. He got hit by a car, if I remember right.
Yeah.
Then he wrote Dreamcatcher, which is
a
one
really
of his
bad accident.
Yeah. I'll put it this way: generally, his alien invasion stories are not very good. Like, I have read 3 of them.
Really, because it kind of is, and it is amazing.
Well, it is amazing, but I didn't really think of that as an alien invasion story. But I guess you could call it that. I guess you could call it that. I'll give you that. He can do it well, but like when you read something like the Tommyknockers or Dreamcatcher, you're like, what the fuck were you doing? Like, what were you on?
No,
my good
I
sir?
have never read the Tommyknockers because I believe the people I've spoken to who have. And
that was
back
him
in
and his
April,
most
I
just
was
like even he can't help but acknowledge how bad it was. Like he just was like,
there was a readathon earlier in the year, and I was captain of one of the teams, and I had to keep track of the reviews because you got a point if you reviewed the book. And at the end of the event, I ended up giving one of my team members a certificate for the best review because they had reviewed the Tommyknockers, they'd given it 1 star, but their review had me almost crying with laughter because I was just like, yeah. Because he spends the whole review going, I have no idea what that was.
that was his.
What are those drugs? Where can I get them? And somebody come and rescue me after I take them because there's something really messed up with them.
His that's definitely that was like his rock bottom on drugs, and you could just tell he was just
Yeah, and that's very much the sense that I get. And it's odd because, and I think this is probably the case with most people, that's why they read the Tommyknockers. Because I probably would never have bothered. But it's always sitting in the back of my head, like one day I'm going to have to read it just for myself to know.
Oh, then try.
Which is probably the only reason why it's still in print.
Then try
Let's face it.
Dreamcatcher. That's another one where you're like, what was this? Like, that's another one you could tell he was on something when he wrote it. It's just, if I remember,
I love it.
He basically just went, I was trying to do for the toilet what, basically I'll put it this way. He said once when he discussed writing this book, he said, I wanted to do for the toilet what Psycho did for showers. And I'll just leave it there.
Yeah, I don't want to be that frightened of toilets. Basically. That would be very unhealthy.
Oh no! Oh yeah!
Oh no! I can't think about that anymore. I can't.
Also, Under the Dome, which isn't terrible, but I just don't care for it. It's just kind of. You could definitely tell
you
could definitely tell he was on that Bush hate train because he's like a big liberal, and the villain in that story is basically Dick Cheney, and you're just like, oh my god, this is so bad. And his son's like a complete psycho. It's just, oh man, it's
okay. That's funny.
It's just,
and this is the wonderful thing though, in that Americans can read that and be like, oh my god, that's so political. People outside America, we can read it and go, that's hilarious because it's political. Because the rest of and I will say this brazenly, the rest of the world looks at America and goes, you guys are fucking insane. Have you seen the people that you have in power? What the hell?
The other day I was watching a senator from my home state. Now I should note I don't want to get too political, so I'll just leave it here. But this Teamsters guy apparently was insulting him on Twitter. He gets up in front of Congress and is about to throw down with the guy, and I'm like, we voted this guy in, I was just, and Bernie Sanders is like, oh no, and Bernie Sanders was breaking it up. It was a debacle. I was just like, oh my god,
that's hilarious. Seriously, and
we're just giving the rest of the world
because I live in New Zealand. Do you know what? Come for me. Go on, come for me. We could use the tourism money. It's we look at America and just go, you guys are nuts. Just absolutely nuts, man. What the hell?
I don't blame you.
Very strange.
We've gone off the rails.
Very strange.
It's Wonderland out here.
At the moment, we just had our general election. And we're only little, granted, okay? We have 4 million people. Full stop, that end. That's how many live here. So it's tiny. I get that. It's a very different scale. But the most controversial our politicians get are... one of them's in his 70s now, and he kind of only appears before every election because we don't have a two-party system. We have multiple parties, and you can vote for whoever the bloody hell you want to. And so we get very mixed governments. And this guy only ever emerges in the few months before an election. But he does it every time, and he's been a part of our government the last 5 times. And it's really controversial when he's going to come into government because he likes old people. Now, the last time he was in government, he, shock horror, gave everybody who was on a pension a gold card, right? Like a little credit card. And it meant that if you were in off-peak traffic hours, you got free public transport. You got free doctor visits.
Oh, the humanity.
And you got a free coffee at McDonald's. And that was like a massive big deal. Because what you're just after the grey vote. And I'm like, do you know what? If our oldies get free public transport and free doctor visits and a coffee, I'm kind of okay with that. You know, there are worse things.
Good thing you're not in America. Oh my God, we're just
far out, man.
We're just. And
then I see American politics, and I'm like, do you hate people? What? Our most hardcore right-wing people here are like socialists to Americans. It's like, what even? Seriously, your politicians hate people, is what I've decided. Yeah. They just hate. Actually, I shouldn't even say that. Your lobbyists hate people. They just hate people. Just in general. Like, everybody should be, I don't know, what, a corporation. They should be a business, because businesses have to be profitable. Sorry, I want to rant now. I've had whiskey.
it's but yeah, going
very
back
strange.
Going back to Under the Dome, like look, I don't hate political stories, but it's just kind of like, it's just like I just kind of rub my eyes. I'm like, oh man, here we go. You're talking about the because I watched The Mist recently, and I remember hearing that even Stephen King acknowledges that the end of The Mist that they filmed is better than the one he had in the book. And I really like that he's human enough to go, actually, that was really good, and admit it. I like the, I don't know, confidence. It's not quite the right word. The humility?
It'll come to me, lady. Well, maybe it is humility to accept that actually that was a better idea for the end. Because the end of that was just devastating.
Oh,
like,
yeah, Cell
oh my
was
God, are
pretty...
you serious?
Also Cell was, I didn't really care for that one either. I like post-apocalyptic.
I didn't watch Cell.
Oh, I mean the book. Because I read it, and I'm like, cell phone zombies.
Oh, okay. Yeah, sign me up.
Get out of here. I've dealt with a lot. I've put up with a lot of. It's one of those situations, where I'm like, I've put up with a lot of shit from you, Stephen King. Not this time. Throwing in the white flag.
Now you're coming for me personally. I'm not okay. Okay, that's funny.
Or
yeah.
That's why I'm hesitant to read Christine, because I'm like, man, a car.
Have you not read it?
A car.
Oh, it's so good. Christine is one of my favorite Stephen Kings.
I've heard people say that. I might try it. I'll try it someday. I'm just kind of like, man.
I really enjoyed it.
Man, a car. It's possessed.
Because it's creepy.
We'll see.
Maybe it's because cars are so pervasive now. You go back far enough, and not everybody had a car, and it was a symbol. It was a status symbol, and it meant something. Now everybody has a car. Now it's a big deal if you don't have a car. People are like, why don't you have a car? What's wrong? But that concept of not everybody having a car, and then when you do get a car, it being menacing. There's something about that works. I really enjoyed Christine.
Also,
really enjoyed it.
It was actually his film after The Thing. He did an adaptation of Christine.
I liked the adaptation of Christine. I think that the young actor that they got, I can't think of the character's name now, who buys the car and is the most affected, he does a really good job. I did like the movie of Christine. They did a good job of making the car creepy. And I mean, we do it as humans. We personify cars. Like, so many people name their cars. We're like, oh, good car, when you make it up a steep hill. But that's the early Steven Spielberg.
Yeah, I think that was like his first movie. Yeah. I really like how it's almost like they made the truck the villain.
truck, scary. Yeah,
So it
yeah.
could
They
work.
do a similar thing. Yeah, a very similar thing where it's just the vibe of being around it. I would recommend you give Christine. It's a quick read too. It's only, I don't know, what, 300 pages ish. It's
Yeah.
from memory. We'll have
God,
to
I don't.
test me on that. It's
Oh
been a
God,
long
I don't.
time since I read Christine,
I don't remember. I
but
actually
it's
tried
really
the
good.
Girl Who Loved Tom Gordon. I just haven't finished that.
I haven't read that one. I don't
Um,
know that one.
11. I'd say his best book, at least in the 2000s that I've read, was 11/22/63.
Everybody says that's so good, and it's up there with The Stand and with
Oh,
it.
it's in my
So
top five.
my
I
best friend
love it.
has it. My best friend has it, so I will be reading that at some point.
Um,
It's on the list. It's on the
no,
list.
it's
But I do intend to, because I like Stephen King's writing. I enjoy spending time in his worlds.
yeah, no, he is very good. It's just kind of he's gone in
It's
some
just some of them you're like,
he's gone in some interesting direct. I would love to see a reaction to Cell, because it's just that one's another just batshit insane one where you're like, what the fuck were you doing? Like, what were you thinking when you wrote that?
what drug was this one? Yeah. Some of his books are like that though, but even those, and I think that's why I want to read one day Tommy Knockers, because even the really weird ones, they have something about them that you're like, there was something really good in that. There was a thread in that that was really worth chasing. Sometimes it's a shame because he misses it and he goes off somewhere else. And you're like, you missed the bit I was interested in. But there's always something. And
Mm-hmm.
yeah, his brain must be a scary place.
Yeah, seems like a
Very
normal
scary
enough guy,
place.
even though like it's so funny. Like, he's just kind of
People live next door to frickin' Jeffrey Dahmer.
he did.
I know people did, just people.
Oh, oh yeah.
People said he was an ordinary bloke, just a nice neighbour.
I
Stephen King, lovely man. Really? Maybe if Jeffrey Dahmer wrote books, wouldn't have been a problem.
at least I
Who
was about to
knows?
say, at least Stephen King writes books and doesn't do any
Yeah,
of the stuff
he
his
gets it
characters
out in other
get.
ways. Healthier ways to deal with that.
No, it's
Yeah, scary place, man.
um
Like, what the heck?
I do like his son Joe Hill a lot too.
Actually, a few people have said that because he did Nosferatu, isn't it?
I
He
haven't
did
read that
Nosferatu,
one. I have read Horns, and that
and
book was awesome.
there's another one. I think
I read one
it'll
called
come to me.
Horns, and I love that one.
People are speaking really highly about him. Um, was it Horns that has a tie to the Dark Tower multiverse thing?
I
I think
don't
one of
think
them
so.
does.
I don't remember it having a tie to the Dark Tower. Now I know they've written
I
some
mean, I
stuff
wouldn't know
together.
if I did read it because I haven't read it.
Um,
That's cool.
yeah, no, it's
Mm.
something. um,
But clearly, that mindset of if you've got a story and you write it down was pervasive in the household. You know, he's clearly grown up knowing if you can think of a story, write it down.
um, another one.
I love that.
Oh man. Um, another author I enjoy. I mean, I like Cormac McCarthy a lot, but that's kind of I've beaten that horse a lot, so.
This is where finding booktube so late has been a bit of a stumbling block for me, in that finding booktube after having had my stroke, I find it difficult to create new worlds in my head now. And it's only since following AP over on A Critical Dragon that I've got some tools that help me read new work. I'm pretty much stuck with rereads unless I do the work to bring in new text. And so there are so many authors and so many worlds that without booktube I wouldn't even know I was missing, that now I'm missing, and Cormac McCarthy is one of them. Um, and it's a shame because then now my list, like on the list, is really long because I've got a lot of years to catch up on, and there's so much new stuff that is just like going, look at me. and it's really hard because it's work to read a new book. And it's just, it's trying to find things that are just familiar enough that I can kind of make my brain go, all right, it can stay. And yet different enough that I'm interested and it will stay. And it's an absolute gift when I do, because it's not as difficult. And I had that with J. Christoph's Empire of the Vampire, which I read not last year, the year before. Yes, I think the end of 2021.
I've heard J. Christoph's a contentious figure.
Very divisive. Very divisive. I actually was talking to my sister about this literally last night. Said the best way to know is to read his review of his own book, Empire of the Vampire, on Goodreads. And if you read that review and you think, what a pompous ass, whatever, don't read the book. If you read it and you're crying with laughter, like I was, read the book. You're going to love it. But it's that clear. It's really that clear. He has a voice. And that voice is out in the open. He's not hiding it from anyone. And he is an author that you either love him or you hate him. There will be no in between. I love him. I am so jealous of Mike at Mike's book reviews right now. He has the arc of the sequel, which doesn't come out until March next year. I am so jealous. It's ridiculous. I haven't been this excited about a new release since the last Robin Hobb book came out.
Well,
that's how excited I am right there for the next book.
Because,
that's how excited I am.
You've become would notorious be a good word? Maybe not. That has negative connotations.
Infamous.
But you've become very well known for your just massive woman crush on Robin Hobb's books.
Huge. Huge. I mean, part of that is a response because I had the stroke. I say stuck. I could only live in the fantasy worlds I had already built. Thankfully, I had already built this world in my head. So as the new books came out, I could still read them, and my brain accepted them, and that was fine. For context, if I try to read anything that's new, I can read it, and it just falls straight back out again. I know I read Name of the Wind. I know I did. I have zero memory of that book. Zero.
I
like
don't
nothing at all. There is not an event in that book I remember.
Well, I don't have any memory of. I just haven't read Name of the Wind yet.
See, but this is the thing. I know that I have. I know for a fact that I have, but I couldn't tell you anything about it.
Yeah, like a lot of your videos.
So that's where I am with. I could read new stuff, but it's not going to stick. So I read Robin Hobb, and I love it so much, and it's so well written that I just kept reading it. I'd hit the end of the series, go back to the beginning and read it. And then as each book came out, it just got added to the reread. So the first 9, like the first 3 trilogies, because 8 were published when I found the world. And the last book of the 3rd trilogy was coming out at the end of that year. So I read, when I found them, it was, I don't know, not long after the birthday, so it will have been maybe April, May. And I read all the way up to what would be the new book, and it was, I don't know, about a month, and then I read the new book. So those first 3 trilogies I've read at least once a year, every year, since 2001. It's an insane number of times to read a book.
Yeah, no, it's...
Let alone 9.
Yeah.
It's a little bit ridiculous.
No, my thing is Hobb is another person I've been recommended a lot, and she seems to be making the rounds on YouTube. Because I don't know if you've noticed this, but on BookTube, there's those authors that just kind of like everyone's like, you should go read.
Go in cycles.
You should go read this. You know, like Terry Pratchett's one of them. Joe Abercrombie's one of them. Scott Lynch to a lesser extent. And Robin Hobb.
and part of that is quality shines through. I mean, if they weren't good enough books, I couldn't have read them that many times. I would have got bored with them. They would have become too predictable. I wouldn't care. I wouldn't want to read them again. But even after a seriously ridiculous number of rereads, like even I recognize there's something wrong, possibly. Maybe I should talk to someone. I still find new things. And BookTube has been amazing for that, because I get to talk to new people who have read it, and they give me an entirely new viewpoint where I haven't seen it from that perspective before. So every time I read it, I'm a different person. I'm that little bit older. I have that little bit more experience. I've talked to more people. They've got more different experiences. They've told me how they see things. So it's always that little bit different. And I'm always able to find more value in this story. And if it wasn't well written, I couldn't do that. And that's, I think, where classics come from. You can reread them, and you can get more out of them, and you can look at it through a different lens, and it still has value. And you can go, okay, I'm a nearly 50-year-old woman and I'm getting this out of the story, but I just spoke to a 24-year-old guy and he got that out of the story. So if I take that into account, how does that change these relationship dynamics that I can see look like this, but he thinks look like that? And to still be able to do that after this many reads is, I think, what lifts a book from a new release, a recent release, it's just sitting in the fiction shelves, to being something you can reread over and over and over again and become a classic within a genre, like Dune does. I mean, how many people read Dune every year? Lord of the Rings, so many people read that over and over again. Hey, Game of Thrones,
about Lord of the Rings, so
yeah, and to create, because I'd have to talk about myself, to create that level of fanatic following, it has to be a solid foundation for it. Hobb has that. George R.R. Martin has that. You can spend, again, I spend too much time on YouTube. You can spend hours theorizing about those books.
Oh, yeah.
You can hours just dealing with the text of those books. There are YouTube channels out there. Some of them are amazing. Some of them a little bit out there. There are channels who devote themselves purely to the symbology of A Song of Ice and Fire.
I don't know if I can do
and
that.
So they're not even dealing with the actual text. They're talking about how it relates to the Indian mythology of the 15th century. They're talking about how it relates to, I don't know, Buddhist astrology, whatever it is. Good books lend themselves to that because there is a richness to the writing and there's enough in the story that you can attach importance to things, and it can bear under the weight. The foundation is strong enough. You try to do that with some books, they're just going to fall apart like tissue paper. There isn't enough substance to them, George R.R. Martin, you can hold up to rereads. Lord of the Rings can totally hold up to rereads. I mean, Christ, the Silmarillion exists. Nobody's battering down that particular fortress of fiction. That's a bastion from all times. That's what makes them so good.
Yeah.
And so, yeah.
I agree with you. But I guess with Robin Hobb, that's another one. I'm kind of prepare your shots, ladies and gentlemen. But this is another one on the Britton's Hangout Hour shot glass game where I talk about things. I tend to be.
What's the bingo board called? Okay.
I tend to be wary of longer series. Like, I don't know if you've read Malazan or Wheel of Time, but I just haven't touched those because those are in the. Those
scary.
Books are in the double digits. I don't know if I wanna depend that time.
They're big.
But Robin Hobb, She's only got 3, so
She's got you. She's got you because they're little sets, and there's an in-world break between all of them.
Mm.
So you can read 3. Take your time. You can come back, read 3. Take your time. You can come back. You can read 3 more. Take your time. By now, though, you're going, I'm not freaking taking my time. Give me the next one. So, it gets a bit like that. But there's not the same overwhelming, holy crap, if I read this one and I like it, there are 12 more.
No,
Because you only ever have to commit to the next 2. And
I mean, don't
most
get mad
fantasy
at me,
readers can do that.
because the reason I was kind of like, I've seen some of the covers, and this is so shamelessly snobbish.
Some of them
I
are terrible.
I'm shamelessly snobbish, but I'm kind of a cover guy. So like, I'll look at a cover and be like, you know, yeah,
You mean,
you
like
look at
those
that, and
ones?
it's like, well, that's not too bad.
A little bit dodgy. I mean, that's probably the nicest of those sets of covers.
But
They're not the best.
they do kind of look romance novel-y, I guess you could say.
There's the Farseer set of these books, these mass markets. They somehow look like Paul Rudd, and I don't know why, but they're like in the fandom, they're the Paul Rudd covers, which is a shame. But then they had these ones which were beautiful, and this one my friend Tanner also from Discord got me, because this is my favourite individual entry.
Actually, I think it was Philip who said, it's like, maybe you could get the UK editions because they're a lot better.
And these ones.
Though,
That's these ones.
Yeah, no,
it's beautiful. Just basically just a really lovely text on the front with that little crest on them. That's much nicer, and all of them look like this. They're beautiful. And so many of my booktube friends got together to get me these. I cried like a baby. I am so grateful I recorded that. It's the only unboxing I have ever done.
No,
And a whole group of people, when they found out I didn't have physical copies, all got together and helped me. Evie and Jake Bishop organised it, and I cried like a baby. I still every day will be like, these are my books that I have. People send me.
No,
they're beautiful.
But the point I was making is, I'm not against reading Robin Hobb because she does trilogies, and I generally try to stick with trilogies unless the longer series really captures my attention, like Game of Thrones for that matter. I actually talked to a friend of mine.
There's a butt coming. I can hear the butt. The butt is coming.
I had a friend of mine who talked to me, and he was like, I read some Robin Hobb. I'm like, oh yeah, I've heard she's pretty good. Like, what's she do? And she's all like, well, imagine like you read a book, you're kind of like, oh yeah, it's okay, and then the ending is just really awesome, and you're like, oh, I want to read more. And then he's like, and repeat. Now I'm sure you're probably. But also my reason, I'm just kind of like, I'm gonna wait for the hype to die down, and then I'll jump in. So
that's not going to happen, honey. It's not going to happen because everybody. It's just such a long series that there's always somebody new starting, which means by the time the person who's hyping it now dies down, they've got to that point. So now they're hyping it. Somebody else has started, and then by the time they die down, this person's got there, and now they're hyping it. It's always going to be.
Maybe
the
I'll
case.
just have to beat down my hesitation and just do it. I don't know.
You kind of just have to do it. Part of it, I mean, the names are terrible. They are terrible names. Basically, there are 4 words. They are assassin, fool, quest, and fate. At least one of those words is in all 16 books. A little bit pain in the ass. Very difficult to tell them apart. And the books are nowhere near as exciting as any of those words make it seem. These are not exciting books. These are not heart-pounding adrenaline books. There is nothing action scene-y about these books. These are very quiet books. First one is a coming of age. It's a coming of age. This is about family drama, it's interpersonal drama. There is this person living their life, and if you're paying attention, you might notice the plot going on in the background. And then it all happens at the end. Because if you were paying attention, the plot happened in the background. And then it all happens at the end. And you're like, oh, I have to read the next one. And again, all about the people and the interpersonal connections, and it's all very dramatic, it's all very family drama, a lot of magic, a lot of drama, plots happening in the background, pay attention, plots playing in the background, and then the end happens and everything happens all at once, and you're like, oh, I have to read the next one. That's what Robin Hobb is.
Oh.
It's very not an exciting read, but you will be in that world, and they will be your friends, and you will be invested in their story. And if you are emotional in any way whatsoever, you will get the feels. If you have had a pet, you will cry. If you have had long-lasting friendships, you will cry. Basically, if you can get through 7 books without crying at least one time, you're not human. That's just the rules.
I'm not much of a crier.
Seriously, you're not human. 7 books. If you can get through the first 7 books without crying, you maybe should talk to someone. There's something wrong with you.
Well,
very emotional.
I'm not much of a crier though. That's the thing. I feel bad.
Mike cried.
What? Have I cried? Yes.
No, but Mike cried. I know Jimmy cried. I know Alex cried. I know Madison cried. Evie was crying in the 2nd chapter of the first book.
Oh my God.
there are tears. There are tears. And so it depends. I mean, it does depend on how emotional you are. But there's going to be one of those little emotional ties that she ties around your heart. She will manage to make bleed at some point. And that's kind of how she spends a long time tying those strings to your heart. Just very slowly builds the story. You get to know everybody and how they interact and what they all mean to each other, and you know how the events are going to pull on those tensions. One of those ties is going to make you bleed soon, and you never know why. Some of them are because they're happy. The biggest crying jag I have reading that series, 16 books of lots of crying. The biggest cry I have every time is possibly one of the happiest moments I've ever read, because it's so beautiful. And I'm pretty sure I pulled a muscle the first time I read it. Oh, because I was just bodily sobbing. And I was beside myself. So it's the series that you can say is really emotional and you're going to cry, it's going to break your heart. And it almost never about a death. It's going to be for something completely different. So she just knows how to pull you in and go, these are your friends and you care about them. You care about what happens. You care about the decisions that happen around them that affect their lives. And then all of a sudden, drama happens and you're like, I need the next book. And yeah, you kind of don't notice she's doing it. Because and a lot of people struggle with the first one. They're like, oh, everyone raves. Why is this so good? Boring. And then all of a sudden, you're at the end of it going, now what? I need the next bit. You genuinely don't notice when you went from, this is boring, why does everyone love it, to, I get it, I need the next book.
Well, I can deal with slow books. I'm not I don't need excitement all the time. I mean, I read The Lies of Lockamora, like, first half of that is build up somewhere. I read Perdido Street Station. First half of that is build up, and then the second half is, oh, shit's going down.
I think a lot of it with Robin Hobb is there is so much hype, and so people expect a lot, and so much of her time is spent, like I said, creating those connections. So it feels really slow. Like, you notice that it's taking a while until suddenly you don't. And at that point, you're in. But it does take that time. And with titles like Assassin's Apprentice, it's not the experience that people are expecting when they go into it. So for a lot of people, they can go into it and... Sorry?
Is there assassinating at least?
A little bit.
Okay.
Like, it's not exciting assassinating. It's,
so what is it made as like
okay,
mundane?
We're getting a build-up of there's plot happening behind, and then, okay, you've been being trained, and there's plot happening behind, and being trained, and there's plot happening behind, he's being trained, and then he'll be like, okay, you're going on a mission, and you need to deal with this situation. And then he'll quietly deal with that situation, quietly, because we're talking about assassination here, not murder that everyone knows is murder. Quietly assassinating somebody, still not realizing the connection to the plot. This is just something he's doing. A lot is happening around him, and we move on. So there's never any sense of urgency about his involvement in the plot. It's happening in the periphery around him, because every alternate series is first person POV. So you're following Fitz. Fitz, when you meet him, is 6 years old, and you're getting his memories of his life. So it's very unreliable narrator that you kind of don't register until he gets a bit older, because, little kids, they don't see much, they don't really register a lot, which is why the plot happens in those books kind of without him knowing, because he's remembering his life, and it didn't impact his life, the events that were happening around him, until he got old enough to realize what was happening. And then you get, oh, and this was happening. So what I was doing was this. And that can be difficult. If you don't connect to Fitz as a character, as a little boy, growing up, having little boy struggles, you're going to struggle. And then it gets to the end and it gets really exciting and things are happening and, I need to know what happens next. And then it shifts away from Fitz completely. And it goes to another area of the world. And you start the next trilogy and you're like, are these even connected? They don't feel like they're connected. Are they connected? Because the next trilogy is third person POV, multiple people, and it's talking ships. And I promise you, they are not like Thomas the Tank Engine. Okay, I promise. That's not what they're like. Because that's what comes to mind. Talking ships. Yeah, that sounds crazy.
Thomas the Train? It's a train, not a ship.
Oh, I know, but there's that sense of it's a talking thing. And
there's talking trains in the Dark Tower.
Oh, well, okay. Could be interesting. And so it doesn't feel connected. And this is why people who haven't read further go, you can start with live ships. I'm here to tell you, people, you cannot start with live ships. You just trust me, you can't. The trilogy after that, we return to Fitz. Now, people who enjoyed the first trilogy wait for ages before they read Live Ships because they don't want to not read about Fitz. So they're like, I don't want to read that trilogy. I don't care. But I know I have to read that trilogy to move forward. But I don't care. So they wait and they wait and they wait. And then they only read it so they can get back to the trilogy that has the characters from the first trilogy. And then they kick themselves because Live Ships is amazing. It is possibly the best fantasy trilogy ever written.
That is some high praise.
If it didn't belong in the Realm of the Elderling series, I would rate it the best fantasy trilogy I have ever read. As a trilogy, as a complete story, for what it does in that story. They are amazing. But they are part of Realm of the Elderlings. So by the end of that trilogy, you've got more knowledge. They bring back the Fitz character for the next trilogy. And what you just learned in the Live Ships trilogy makes the Tawny trilogy so much better because you've got so much more knowledge about the world it impacts what's happening in that trilogy. And you get a little bit of crossover in characters, which makes that trilogy better in hindsight. And then, because that is built off the back of the two previous trilogies, it means that Live Ships, despite being the best trilogy in itself, isn't the best trilogy within Realm of the Elderlings. Because that's built on Live Ships. You can't call that trilogy better than that trilogy, because standing alone, it needs the ones before. But Live Ships doesn't. Live Ships is amazing. And from there, it becomes this massive, great, sprawling story, and yet somehow is still very intimate. And it's called Realm of the Elderlings, and lots of readers forget that that's the scope of the story, because it feels like Fitz's story when you're in Fitz's trilogies. And the stories that aren't Fitz-centered feel like their own stories. It's really hard to step back from those stories and find the connective tissue, which is the Elderlings, the Realm of the Elderlings, and make it into this one cohesive story until you get to the very last trilogy that basically opens that last little window and shows you how everything ties together. And then you go, oh my God, I have to reread immediately, because now I see what was happening. And then you go back and you get to read an entirely new series by an author you already know you love, in a world you already know you love, but it's a whole new story now because everything means something different. And you realise the whole story was there all along. You just didn't notice because you were busy reading the main plot. It's astonishingly good. Astonishingly good. So, that's my spiel. Read Garcia.
That's the pitch. That's the pitch meeting. Yeah.
Read Farsia. Get to know Fitz. Spend some time with Fitz. Realise he's an idiot. But he's our idiot and we love him. So. That's pretty much all you need to know. Fitz is an idiot.
Even though he's an assassin. Isn't he also a bastard as well?
It's actually really old English, the word Fitz, and it does just mean out of wedlock. So that's where you get names like Fitzwilliam, Fitzherbert, Fitzgerald, Fitz whatever. The part of Fitz means that whoever was at the beginning of that family line wasn't an acknowledged child of the official family, but was an acknowledged child of the line. So Fitz just means bastard. So it's the main character, and he's a bastard, and he's an idiot. We love him because he means well. He's just a dork. You know, that happens. We all make dumb choices. He just makes a lot of them. So, yeah.
It happens a lot.
It has talking ships, and there's magic, and there's talking to animals, and some characters can talk to animals, and some characters have the magic that allows them to talk to other people or make them dream things or convince them of things. It's a kind of telepathy, but not quite. In the Live Ships trilogy, you get the talking ships, you get all the magic that has to do with that. There's
so is it
things
a
I can't get
first-person
into because
perspective with Fitz?
Fitz is in the first trilogy, which is Farsia. He's in the third trilogy, which is Tawny Man, and he's in the last trilogy, which is Fitz in the Fall. The Live Ships trilogy, which is second, and the Rainwild Chronicles, which is between Tawny Man and Fitz in the Fall, are both third-person, multi-person POVs. So it goes Fitz books, not Fitz books, Fitz books, not Fitz books, Fitz books.
So is Fitz is he? So is he the narrator of the trilogy?
He narrates his story, and it's retrospective first person for Farsia for the first 3 books. And he ages between 6 and around about 19, 20 in the first 3 books. Then you go to live ships where it's a whole different bunch of people. They're all different ages. They're all in different parts of the world that's happening. And so you follow their story. And when you come back to Fitz, there's been a big in-world jump and he's 35. And so you come back to him at 35 and you get roughly 2 years from him in a vaguely present tense first person. It feels like he's occasionally a bit ahead of himself, but you're mostly in the same time frame. And then you go to the Rainwild Chronicles. And then when you come back, there's been another big time jump. And you come back to Fitz, and he's about 60. And the first few chapters of the Fitz and the Fool trilogy sort of give you the catch up of where he's been and what he's doing and what is all happening. And for most of that final trilogy, he's about 65. So you follow this character from a little boy, from like a small child of 6 years old, to an old man. And not a lot of fantasy stories give you that from their main POV. Like you'll have characters that will age, but to follow one person their whole lives from their perspective is unusual. And it becomes, he's my friend. I know Fitz. He's in my heart. He's one of my heart people. I know him. I love him. I care about what happens to him. And that closeness that she's able to give you forms an incredible tie. You think about how close you become to characters going through things similar to you, or you wish you were like you. I want to be this person. This sounds amazing, and how close you get to them. Fitz he just becomes like your best friend ever, who's a dork. You love them, you want to shake them sometimes. Like, stop making stupid decisions. But you love them, so you're like, well, okay, you did that. That was really dumb. Okay. What are we doing now? And it's remarkable. Truly remarkable that you get. The wonderful thing is, as you go, he starts reflecting on earlier things. He's a kid in the first trilogy. He's between 6 and 19. So when you get him in Tawny Man, he's 35. He starts, in his writings, he starts telling you basically, I thought I was making the right decision when I did that. I'm older now. I can see where I went wrong. So he looks back on his decisions and the things it causes in his life. And he sort of goes, if I'd done that differently, that would have fallen differently. And that self-reflection, you don't get a lot in fantasy. You don't get that a lot in literary fiction. That whole, I made a mistake, and can I fix it? And if I can't fix it, I've got to live with it. How do I do that? Knowing it was my own fault. It makes it a really fascinating read. And it's grown with me. And I started reading when I was probably about your age. Did you 22, you said 23, 22?
22. That's how old I am.
22, yeah. So I started in, so I was 26 when I started reading Realm of the Elderlings. And it's grown with me. You know, it's a hell of a journey. Hell of a journey.
Well, I have really loved this conversation.
Nicely put.
I'm getting hungry though. I do have to go, but it has been so good talking with you though. It's just been. This is one of those conversations I didn't know what to expect, but I am very glad we finally managed to make it work. This was truly wonderful.
I'm glad that you had. Yes, I'm. It's a flattering thing for a start that anyone wants to talk to me at all. So I apologise for kind of talking at you as long as I have.
That was great.
I apologise.
I'll definitely keep you in mind if I decide that whenever I decide to get around to doing Robin Hobb.
Now that I know you have even a vague interest, I'll keep track. You'll hear from me. And so you started that yet? Oh, no, it's all right. Hey, anyone can tell you, I won't bully you into reading it. I won't even be grumpy if you take your time. I might get a little disappointed. Might get my mum voice out and be disappointed, but I'm okay. I can even take a little bit of critical discussion on it. I won't take it too personally.
If you have any social media, you feel free to share it and share your channel and all that.
Literally just the YouTube, so that you can find me on Derri's read it before, or if you're a part of Discord, if there's a Hobb thread near you, you may find me there.
All right. Well, this has been another episode of Britton's Hanging Out. I hope you guys enjoyed this. I know I did. So. Till next time.
Awesome. Cheers, Britton.